Fortunately, there haven't been a whole lot of public officials that have come on the record making comments against return to the land, the association. A few have, but most haven't, and I think that's partly because they're reading the room. Local officials, more so than national officials who kind of have their head in the clouds over there in DC, they really understand how far the Overton window is shifting. And a lot more than what the media and social media wants us to let on. Because if the Overton window hadn't shifted alarmingly to the right, then a lot more public officials would have come on the record, condemning return to the land for being a big, bad, evil association who dare have controversial political views or nationalist political views, which is perfectly normal and isn't a crime. So it may be possible that there's a big financial windfall in the future if we're able to sue some of these public officials who have spoken out. I mean, some of them just weren't thinking. It's not... Public officials do have free speech. And to some extent, they can express their political views. But there is a line that has to be drawn. There's a line that is drawn, and there are certain things that they can't say. And I don't necessarily think that the city manager and city council of Springfield, Missouri did or didn't break the law with their official statement earlier this year. That remains to be seen. They came out with some big official statement, essentially condemning return to the land and basically warning return to the land from moving to Springfield, and thinly veiled implication that they would use government force against people, U.S. citizens, to prevent them from moving to their city because of their political views. And that's really alarming. I just don't think that they were thinking straight when they put out that statement. I think the liberal residents of Springfield, who are few and far between, were cheering them on, and most of the conservative residents were really unhappy with that. But that's what you get. You shouldn't have elected a liberal mayor, and you shouldn't have allowed the liberal mayor to hire a liberal city manager. And they may have run under the Republican ticket, I don't know, but we can't use the Republican identifier to determine someone's political beliefs anymore. You have lots of rhinos who are essentially liberals or Democrats pretending to be Republicans, and a lot of Republicans are fooled by that because maybe they support a couple Republican things and they support Israel. So I'm going by someone's beliefs and actions, not by what they call themselves when I refer to a public official as liberal or conservative or Republican. So when somebody like the city manager of Springfield makes such a public statement, they're going based on allegations made by the media. And they're making very specific legal claims about us, which is problematic, that aren't based on fact. I don't think the I read it on the internet would hold up in court. If a public official were to be sued for implying that government force would be used to prevent United States citizens from moving to a city based on their political views, discrimination, I think that would be a violation of the constitutional rights. When that happens, somebody messaged me saying, well, why aren't you guys immediately suing this guy? Well, we don't have the money to just voluntarily engage in massive lawsuits like that. I hope that we do in the future. As we build the organization, we aren't only going to be relying on donations to our legal fund. We're going to have income streams. So hopefully in the future, it can be a big windfall for us. Just going back, kind of like Kyle Rittenhouse did, Steven Crowder, just naming off conservatives who have won huge settlements from media companies. In our case, could be media companies and public officials for sort of engaging in this game of making specific legal claims, defaming somebody. And I think, and I don't mean to be picking on the city manager of Springfield, he's just a great example of what I'm talking about. When they read news articles about return to the land, unfortunately, they haven't been red-pilled about how inaccurate the media tends to be. So they assume that when they say that return to the land is simply a whatever evil, big, bad, white nationalist, neo-Nazi group that's like supposedly, allegedly skirting fair housing laws by publicly buying and selling shares in a real estate company or something like that. They assume that's all true, and they make their statements based on that. Like I said, I read it on the internet or I saw it in the media thing isn't necessarily going to hold up in court, since the media is really, really unreliable for things like that. And so they don't realize that, for example, Return to the Land is a very large association with local chapters all over the country. By the way, that's also been used by ChatGPT legal researchers to claim that we aren't a private club due to our size. ChatGPT will cite a Supreme Court case with the USJCs where they claimed that 430 was too large to be a private club. 400 to 430 was too large to be a private club. The problem is they didn't actually read the case themselves. They let ChatGPT read it for them. In the actual case, the judge is talking specifically about local chapters of a national organization. The national organization had tens of thousands of members. That was not the issue. That did not make them not a private club. The criteria was that the local chapters were hundreds and hundreds of members, were too big to be a private club. So Return to the Land does not have that problem. Just one of many examples how people get misled using facts for legal analysis that are not based on reality. Your legal analysis has to be based on a set of facts that are provably correct. And so that's not an issue for us. But anyways, what the city manager may not have realized is that Return to the Land has hundreds of members around the country, including a number of members that live in Springfield. So he's essentially saying that if you're a member of Return to the Land, don't come live in my city and I might use the government against you because we will not stand for this. That kind of thing was implied by his statement. You can easily see how there's a strong legal argument to be made that by that statement, he wasn't just exercising his free speech. He was infringing upon the constitutional rights, threatening the constitutional rights of American citizens, including some who lived in his city. Because he didn't realize that when the media says it's just a scary neo-Nazi group that lives in Arkansas and they're thinking of coming to Missouri, he assumed that was correct and made his statement based on that. The actual reality of the group was far, far different. And one of the other misconceptions that public officials may end up costing their taxpayers millions of dollars in the future when they make statements based on this. One of the misconceptions is that the whole whites only thing. So they've even gone so far as to like Photoshop or AI generate images of me and Eric holding a sign that says whites only, or a sign on the gate that says whites only, which is completely ridiculous. But the implication, the very strong implication that they're making is that we're violating the law by being a whites only organization. And some of you might be thinking, well, what do you mean? Return to the Land? Well, isn't it a whites only organization? The media said that. Let me explain something. There's a big difference between an organization that has a whole bunch of different exclusionary criteria for membership and an organization that is simply a whites only organization. The latter is explicitly illegal, even if it's a private club. The former is explicitly legal if it's a private club, if it meets a number of other Supreme Court criteria, which we've extensively researched. So when somebody's quoting Supreme Court cases at you, telling you that RTTL is not a private club, make sure that it's not ChatGPT hallucinating legal arguments and analysis from these cases based on a set of facts that was provided by the prompter that's not correct. So there are some organizations that would claim that that they have exclusive membership criteria beyond just the ethnic criteria, and those things might just be lipstick on the pig. They might say, well, yeah, we filter for all this other stuff too, and when you look into their records, you would find that really it's just a big, ugly, whites-only racist organization, and they have no legal standing. The problem with people making that claim about Return to the Land, both our external data and both our external claims and our internal data back up the fact that it's a private association with a whole bunch of different exclusionary criteria. One of the most darning pieces of evidence in our favor is if you were to look at our internal application and acceptance data, we reject far, far, far more white people than far more Europeans than people of any other ethnic group, right? We reject far more Nord bros and Anglo bros and Med bros and Slav bros, or whatever you want to call them, all the individual European ethnic groups, because we look at a whole lot of factors. This isn't solely a race-based organization, and that's a big legal distinction. It's really important. It's one of the main differences between a private club being legally exclusionary and illegally exclusionary. And public officials need to be careful where they're getting their facts from, because they make claims about us and they warn that U.S. citizens shouldn't even consider moving to their city because of their political beliefs. Their argument is not going to hold up if they didn't even do basic research into Return to the Land and find out if it's not maybe not the big boogeyman that the media is claiming it to be. So the media will come and ask for all that criteria. When they ask me questions, they'll ask about race stuff. I'll be like, what are you talking about? There's a whole lot of reasons that we're living here, and you're focusing on one of them, one of the demographic issues that are, one of the issues of our time is a major demographic issue, and they're only asking about that. And so they ask, okay, what about all the other stuff? And I'll go on a whole long monologue describing all of our other beliefs. None of that makes it to the final cut. None of that actually makes it to the article. And so they're purposely shaping a narrative where they're making us out to be an illegal organization that only has big, bad, ugly race as a exclusionary membership criteria. That's what they're doing, and public officials should be careful to not fall for that trap, because as public officials, their job is not to be sensational. The media's job is to be sensational. They're simply doing their job. Now, I would say that shouldn't be the media's job, but realistically nowadays that is the media's job. Unfortunately, it's not to report the truth, it's to be sensational. Public officials should not forget that their job is not to be sensational and ride the trend waves. It's to, in the end, protect the constitutional rights of American citizens and aid them in their right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and private property, and protect all of their rights. So they shouldn't be trampling on the rights of people in a private association based on false claims made by the media. Who knows, maybe in the future we'll just get endless millions of dollars of funding by waging lawsuits against these people. But if you live in one of these areas where your public officials are speaking out against our organization, write a letter to your public official, let them know it's not cool. They're exposing the municipality, they're exposing the taxpayers to potentially millions of dollars in legal settlements. And it's not wise. And their legal counsel, because every town has an attorney, right? Every city has an attorney or multiple. They might be a liberal fresh out of college, right? They're not advising their city manager or their mayor not to say things like that, because maybe they're a liberal and they don't care that it's going to cost the taxpayers millions of dollars in the future. But you as a citizen, you should care. And hey, if you're in Texas, right about that law they recently made, it was supposedly a law to combat Epic City, but it really doesn't do anything about Epic City at all, but it does severely infringe upon the rights of individuals to collectively own property together. So that's something that you need to write to your state officials about, or just start tweeting them on Twitter, right? That's a pretty popular thing. I regularly tag Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas, who, by the way, is a huge Zionist. I tag him and stuff on Twitter all the time. He maybe never sees it, but if enough people are tagging him about that stuff, they're going to see it, and they're going to think twice about making false claims about such a large organization that's growing and growing and growing, because the Overton window is shifting significantly. And that's all I have to say. Have a good day, folks.